and welcome back to IVF Daddies. Today we have another good friend of mine. I was saying I have great friends, but I really do. I'm very lucky. Today we have a great friend of mine on who has literally just flown in from New York and has dropped her bags and come straight onto the podcast. So today, Cynthia, thanks, Cynthia.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. And yes, I did just get off the plane.
So Cynthia is somebody that I find incredibly inspirational, and I've known her now for nearly 10 years.
At least.
Yeah. And I first met her when she was dating an embryologist and has done a lot of behind the scenes work on making babies. So I met her when she was working with Cynthia in Las Vegas. Then living in New York, they would fly her from New York to Las Vegas. That's how good she is. Anyway, she's through. Yeah, I'm bigging her up, right? And I truly, incredibly inspirational and have helped many people. I'm thrilled to have you on today. Cynthia, what are you doing there?
What am I doing now? So I am currently working as, I'm an embryologist. That will never change, but I'm now working with a technology company that is building some tools and technology for kind of my former self, right? So the embryology lab is highly manual. It is labor intensive. It is these hands do a lot of the work, and they will continue to do a lot of the work in the lab. But what we can do to try to introduce safety and scale possibilities for this industry, because we're not really meeting the needs of all of the patients that need care, is we need to build some technology and introduce tools to better secure the audit trail, better secure the chain of custody. We want to make sure that this egg and this sperm became this embryo, and this embryo was identified and it belongs to this person, and then it was frozen, and then it was identified and it was checked into storage, and now we can build this specimen record for the patients to ensure that when they go to return and get their tissues back, we know it's there. So it's building tools and technology for that.
Which sounds legal.
It's the first time I've been on the product development side. So I've worked in the lab, I've owned the lab, I've managed them, I've started them, I started clinics. But this is the first time I've actually been on the product development side and making tools for my former self. And I like to say to my company engineers, you're basically making a tool for me, so you should probably make me happy. Don't do it this way, do it this way. Because that makes more sense to me. What problems do I really need to solve? And I think that's the lens that we should not forget about when we try to bring technology and all of these tools into different fields. You can't have someone just completely outside. You need someone to bridge that. And that's what I've been acting.
And that's what you've been for many years. So you're bringing a personal experience into the med tech, I would assume it's called, in medical technology. And so to grow that in. Like, one of the questions then for me is, you said, almost like we're failing the customer a little bit. Duty or in our duty of care, almost like we are sitting here going, well, this is what we're doing. We're trying to increase it and improve it. How are we doing that specifically? Because a lot of this podcast is talking to people about the front thing, how we're making a baby, the personal journeys, all of that.
Mm-hmm.
This is the back end of it. And I think it's really, really kind of fascinating. It's something we're not, but understanding a little bit behind the scenes of what goes on, and then how are you improving that, changing, disrupting?
Yeah, I would not quite characterize, I think we're failing the patient. I think we're doing a really great job. And I think most people walk away, if not necessarily with the family they want, but at least that they've had a good experience in that journey. And we know that it's not every human or couple that walks in the door is not going to walk out with a family. And that's a tragedy. So we're all working on different ways to bring more efficacy, more efficiency, and just I think we owe it to ourselves and our patients to raise the bar and keep raising the standard of care. And 20 years ago, we didn't have, some of this technology to automatically identify specimens. So we've automated that in the software platform. We have taken embryos that used to culture in the laboratory for 2 days or 3 days. We're now able, through this technology, through this innovation, through all of this research and development that we've done, to say, you know what, we can now take those embryos and culture them for 5 or 6 days, or maybe even 7 days. Because we know that not every egg-sperm interaction makes a baby, And one of the best tools we have is to try to winnow down those egg and embryo combinations so that at the end, we have a really high confidence that one of those is going to actually make a baby. If I take an embryo on day 2 of development and say I have 5 of them, I can transfer them one at a time and find out which one may or may not work. But if I take those 5 embryos on day 2 and I culture them for 5 days, I may only end up with 2 or 3. And so now I've reduced the potential time to pregnancy by self-selecting those embryos as it would occur naturally in the woman's body anyway. And I can do that in the laboratory just by even culturing them longer, having the technological ability, having the scientific know-how to culture them longer in the laboratory has dramatically improved the chances of success per attempt. If we say that I want you to try to have a baby now, I want to do everything I can to try to pick the best one.
And how do you pick? Do you pick those sperm? And what is the technology itself? What does it do?
There are different ways to think about that. We're trying to pick the best sperm.
How do you do that?
You can look at it with your eyeball and say, you know what, this one is swimming in circles, this one's not swimming at all, and this one looks really weird, sort of basic stuff. We call that morphology. But what is the best looking sperm? We don't have as critical a lens for eggs. We take what we get. There are far fewer of them. You're talking 10 million sperm and maybe 4 eggs. So we don't winnow eggs. We take everything that is potentially fertilizable that could potentially make an embryo. The sperm we try to meet at, there's typically excess. I only need 1 per. So we look at that. There are ways to evaluate so there are a few things that go into the chance of ultimate success, right? We know that the age of the egg that is contributing to this IVF cycle is the single most influential factor. But we also know that the sperm quality matters a lot. If you don't have a good quality sperm sample, your chance of success is going to be much lower than if you had a high quality sperm sample. And one of the things that we do is it's a standard semen analysis. Okay, so we look at how many sperm are there. We look at how well or if they are moving, because sometimes they move very quickly, sometimes they move slowly, sometimes they move in circles, sometimes they don't move at all, sometimes they look really strange and they have large heads, and sometimes they have curly tails. We do a fair amount of evaluation on the sperm to make sure that we're trying to weed through and pick the ones that we think are good. There are other tests that we can do on the male. There's DNA fragmentation assays, so we can look to see that the DNA integrity of the sperm is either more or less healthy. There's some new companies coming out, one of them Inherent Biosciences, and they're coming out with a really interesting test that has a very strong correlation to the chance of success for an intrauterine insemination cycle. So in order to see if that patient does need to go all the way to in vitro fertilization, or maybe they can get pregnant, that couple can get pregnant with a sort of a lesser invasive cycle. So these are turkey-based method, but what's the likelihood of the turkey-based method going to work? Right? So should we waste our time and do 6 intrauterine insemination cycles? Should we do it because there's a good chance, or should we not and we should jump right to IVF?
Interesting. What I'm taking from that is the single biggest predictor is the quality of the egg.
The age.
The age of the egg.
Yeah.
But at the same time, the quality of the sperm is just as important. And a lot of times we're seeing the woman feel that it's her fault and it's all the egg. But actually what you're saying is,
I'm sorry, it takes 2. It really does take 2. There is no someone coming in there. There's no egg that's walking around the lab that doesn't have sperm. Whether that sperm is from a partner, from a donor, but there's an equal contribution to the genetic makeup of that embryo. And I need good DNA from the sperm, and I need good DNA from the egg. And if I don't have those things, then my chance of success is really low. Every single egg and sperm are unique. Every embryo, every egg-sperm combination in an embryo is unique. There is no other human like us, with identical twins, but different story. But every single combination is unique, and not every single one of those embryos is going to produce a live birth.
Really interestingly, you forgot something. I regularly get asked if my twins are identical. I have a boy and a girl. They are not identical. I'm like, again, and it's just one of the, are they identical? I'm like,
Well,
yeah.
no. That's
So,
really fun.
so anybody asking, they're not identical. I have a boy.
We don't know how to do that. Yeah. I mean, maybe someday there's going to be some future development to make a boy and a girl identical twin, but we're not there.
Yeah.
But I think it's, I think it's important to understand, at least for your viewers to understand that there's a lot of science here, and there is a lot of thought and development and research and technology going into trying to figure out if that egg sperm combination is really going to make a baby. Because if I don't think that embryo has a chance of making a baby, I don't want to put it back. I don't want to waste your time. I don't want to put you through a cycle where you're going to have to prepare your lining, whether it's a natural cycle or a controlled, a medicated. We have to prepare your uterus in order to receive the embryo at the right time. So typically when we do IVF, the egg is ovulated, we get the sperm, we put them together in the lab. On the next day, we figure out how many of those eggs are fertilized. And then maybe 5 days later, we have an opportunity to put one of those embryos back into the uterus, because that's the right timing for the uterus to be receptive. Now, if we try to put an embryo back into a uterus that isn't receptive, even if it's the best embryo in the world, you're not going to get pregnant. So you have this now other factor out there, the uterine receptivity.
So I think what you're saying is that when in a natural environment, an egg will be ovulated, there will be sperm wherever it needs to be.
The right time?
At the right time, the egg and the sperm will come together, they take down the fallopian tube and it'll travel 5 days down.
Yeah.
And then the uterus would be ready for the embryo to implant. But what does ready mean? When a woman has her period, that is her uterus lining shedding.
Correct.
Which means that no embryo attached. Her body is not pregnant, get rid of it.
Mm-hmm.
But before that, what happens is her uterus lining is thickening in the hope of getting pregnant.
Mm-hmm.
And so what we're doing here is you're either doing a natural cycle, which is you're going through your monthly cycle, there's an embryo, the embryo is put into at the right time when the uterus lining is thick enough, so she hasn't got a period, thick enough, and an implant.
Yeah.
Or you're medicating, taking drugs to thicken the lining to get it to its speed.
Yep.
Is that?
Yeah, it's exactly. So there's a little more to it than just being thick. There's some chemical changes, there's some biological processes that go on in the uterus to indicate whether it's at its most receptive, right? And so one of the things that, we could go so many places with this, but a lot of a natural cycle. Woman ovulates, hopefully there's a partner, he has sperm, they get together at the right time, there's the course of development. There's a few things that have to happen. The embryo has to continue to develop, first of all, at all. The egg has to fertilize first. It has to then continue to divide. It has to get to that stage, which we call the blastocyst. It has to hatch out of that shell, that zona pellucida that has carefully been protecting it the whole time. And then once it gets out of that shell, the uterus has to be receptive, And so in one of those things fail along the way, the woman's not going to get pregnant. Humans, by the way, are the least reproductively efficient species on the planet. That's just a fact.
They
Are the worst.
all the time. We're
awful.
terrible. We're on reproduction. I'm like, it's nice practice.
It is perfectly normal for a couple trying to get pregnant to not get pregnant every month. That is expecting. That is normal. And unfortunately, that's just how we evolved. But it's not your fault that you're not getting pregnant, or it took you 5 months, or it took 11 months of trying. That's what we expect. And one of the advantages of doing IVF is that we have this incredible ability to condense time. So as a human, a female human will typically ovulate 1 egg per month. Okay? And you will get together at the right time, hopefully, and your sperm and your fallopian tubes are open and everything works, and you don't get pregnant. Now, if I say, if you've tried this, if you're under the age of 35, so the one, and you've been trying for 12 months, and again, all conditions being ideal, you haven't conceived, then we say that you have a problem. But it takes 12 eggs to winnow through. Before one egg per month, we say you should try 12 times before we could really say with some certainty, knowing nothing else about you, that we should probably take a look at you, and there's some infertility.
So if you're 39, by the time you're 40, so it's a whole year.
That's if you're under 35. If you're over 35, matter for 6 months. You're 6, but within 6 times, okay, is the standard of what you would consider someone to be infirm. They tried 6 times. Now, if I do IVF on a patient, and I take these really powerful hormones, unfortunately, that most of them have to be injected, and we stimulate your ovaries, we hyperstimulate your ovaries. So now I get those 12 eggs all at once. I, in effect, just took a year of you trying and condensed it down into 1 month. Okay, now, would you have gotten pregnant over that year? Maybe yes, maybe no, but I'm going to try to get to that answer a lot sooner. And I can answer that question in 30 days versus 355. It's a massively powerful tool for us in order to increase that probability of success. Because again, we're horrendous, reproductively speaking, as a species. That's just a fact. So let's use the tools that we have available. We've developed these really powerful drugs. We can get a bunch of eggs at once, and now let's see if we can find that baby faster.
Which is me. There is obviously a downside. There's cost.
Sure.
Having to go through an IVF cycle is expensive. Money's no object, and you have the ability to do that. It's almost like creating optionality in or not.
Yeah.
But also, if you know you don't want to get pregnant, you don't want to have a child now, well, do the IVF cycle, bank those embryos, put them in place, and again, you're saving that time.
Yeah. Again, because we always go back to the age of the egg, and that's the ability to freeze eggs. At least in the United States, in 2012, our governing body basically said that it was no longer experimental to freeze eggs. And the number of women that came into the fertility clinics to start freezing their eggs started going up and up. And now that also presented a logistical challenge on the clinic side, because now, for the first time, you're seeing this enormous class of humans entering the fertility clinic just for long-term storage. They're not trying to get pregnant. This is now a completely new, almost discipline for a fertility clinic, because they've historically been set up to have a patient and a partner and 2 people to evaluate and stimulation and diagnostic workup and all of that stuff to try to get them pregnant. We're not talking about that. We're talking now about young, not even some older or younger women coming in without a partner, without a plan. They just want to save the option to do so in the future. And that is a really interesting, I won't say puzzle, but it's a little bit of a puzzle for a clinic to start now adjusting and adapting their services and their personnel and their consents and their treatment and their story and their paperwork and all of that stuff inherently in the clinic system for all of these people that are now crossing the threshold just to put those eggs directly into long-term storage. And now that's continued to exacerbate the problem for the clinics, because now not only am I putting all of those eggs into storage the second they cross the threshold, I'm taking all of these embryos now and doing some really cool testing on them, which requires me to freeze them, test them, freeze them, before I can figure out which ones I want to put back. For a clinic, from a logistical perspective, they're now almost accidentally a long-term storage facility. Not their core competency, not what they have, not what they've been trained to do. We went from minimal stem, fresh embryo transfers were better than frozen, and that was the dogma of the day. And now flip that story 10 or 12 years later, and now frozen is a lot of times better than fresh, and we're now freezing proactively.
Which to me also then brings up the whole topic of what happens when the storage goes wrong, right? We've seen this happen in the States. We've seen it happen in other countries where there's a problem with tank failure. There's a problem with just embryos or eggs or sperm that is not identified correctly being used. It happened to a friend of mine. Right? they're a child because she carried it and gave birth to it, but genetically, it's not there.
Yeah.
So that technology that I guess you're talking about that we started with, that's targeting that problem.
Yeah, exactly. And because we didn't have the right tools for scale, right? We didn't have, because of this massive influx, we have to figure out how do we safely identify all of these things? How do we store them? How do we track them? How do we trace them? We took a piece of the laboratory that was, for all intents and purposes, afterthought. No one built an IVF clinic 20 years ago with a large cryostorage in mind. It just didn't happen. And it's nobody's fault, but it just wasn't the thinking, right? I'm going to freeze the leftovers rather than I'm going to freeze everything that comes in the door. It's a very different proposition. It's not that hard to keep track of a couple of hundred patients. It's really hard to keep track of a couple of thousand patients. Okay. And so now there's this technology wave, right? And so this company called Tomorrow Life Sciences, and what they've done is they said these founders of this company who, happen to be speaking to someone, these naturally curious humans that have started companies before, and they were speaking to someone that froze her eggs, and they asked her a bunch of questions, and they said, many, and where are they? And she was really able to answer a lot of what they thought were really critical, important questions, like how did you invest all this money and this time and this emotion and this hugely important asset, and you know virtually nothing about this massive asset that you just physically underwent, emotionally, financially underwent. And so how are the clinics doing this? How are they managing it? And it evolved into a company. But anyway, I got introduced to them some years ago, and yeah, I know the problem. I know what you're trying to solve, and I think I can help you solve it. And that's how I got into that product development phase. But
Which is amazing to have that. Because I always say, and video, being picture it, and well, obvious for these, that was obvious to you, not obvious to anybody else. And I apologize whenever I say obviously to those people that don't understand. That's on me, and I'm sorry.
Yeah.
But to have that inherent, like you have all of that knowledge up here, and to be able to go to somebody to say, these are the challenges that we face, and for them to build something to address and to revolutionize and disrupt that industry, that's huge, right?
Yeah, I think it lends a lot more credence and credibility to the technology, that it's not just coming out from left field and somebody in some research lab somewhere came up with something. I'm like, what are you talking about? Human IVF. So it's been really interesting to serve as that bridge on the product development side, because I know both sides. I know all sides of the house, really.
And how are they identified? Because that to me is fascinating.
So again, there's a journey, right? We've got eggs, we've got sperm, we've got then embryos. They're going through, we're now maybe testing these embryos, and we're taking this ball of cells that probably has 100 or 120 cells. We're taking 4 or 5 of them off. And then we're freezing that embryo, and now we're putting those cells in a little tube and sending them off to a lab to figure out that embryo is the correct number of chromosomes, which is one of the things that we look at to see if we should transfer that embryo back. What is more or less likely to make a baby? So yeah, it's someone like me that is identified, right? So what tools and technology can we develop and use to help me do a better job? Because there's no embryologist in the world that wants to make a mistake. No one wants to make a mistake. But we're humans, and we're fallible, and this industry is crying for a technology sort of revolution in order to bolster the scale that A, we're currently doing, and B, to scale this so that we can now open the door for all of the other people that can't really enter the door now. And
what do you think is stopping that door being open to everybody?
it costs us too much to provide the service. It's too expensive. Really.
So it's too expensive, not for the patient coming in, but it's actually expensive for the clinic that's doing everything, and then they have to do a markup, and then you push it forward.
It's an influx of patients that is not coming in to get pregnant right now. And so you could almost be crowding out potentially some of the people that want to get pregnant. The clinic has to handle both of that sort of volume. Or they can say, you know what, we're not really focusing so much on egg freezing. Go somewhere else and freeze your eggs because we're really focusing on this. You have to ration the service halls. Yeah, or what's the capacity?
Could you almost explain what are the costs that go into the clinic part and where you think that could then be reduced to then pass on those cost reductions to a patient?
I think we have to look at, and not that a lot of this is not sexy or really high tech. Think about, like, how do you go to your consult, right? Do you call up to make an appointment? Do you go online? Do you have an app on your phone? Like, how do you schedule an appointment? This is not rocket science. This doesn't really have anything to do with fertility necessarily. This applies to operational efficiency in general. And so if I'm a patient and I've been struggling and I've been 12 months and I'm not pregnant and I want to go see a consultant, how do I even start? So from an infrastructure standpoint, I might be on the National Health Service. I may have to go see my gynecologist first. There's certain things that we have to do, but the physical act of getting through the process is something where I think we have a really interesting opportunity to operationalize some of those efficiencies there, right? Can I use an app on my phone to schedule the appointment? Do I have to go to the office, or could I do some of this work at home, right? Because it costs me money to either take time off of work, drive to the clinic, or take the tube, or whatever I need to do. There's a big segment of the population that, whether or not they can technically afford it, they don't have access to care because they don't have the bandwidth from a life-work balance in order to access the treatment. It is really time intensive. And if you don't have the time to have a job and if your clinic requires 9 visits over 12 days to go back and forth to the clinic, then you don't have access to care.
Right. And also, if you book on your app, 6 weeks later, you have an appointment with the doctor, but it's not the right time of the month, so you have your appointment with the doctor, then you have to go back 2 months later with results. Like,
it's crazy. It's craziness, right? So there's another company that I advise, and it's called Brezina. And what they've done is they've built a tech stack and algorithms that now a clinic, should they choose to use, and clinics are doing this, will refer the patient to them. They can run them through the standard first appointment. The first appointment with a consultant is your health history. Have you ever been pregnant? How long have you been trying to be pregnant? You're basically it's a fairly standard template of what do I need to know about you? And then what am I going to ask you to go do? Has your partner had a semen analysis? What is your FSH level? What are your basic hormone levels? Have you ever, anyone ever looked to see if your tubes are open? Your fallopian tube. What is your thyroid? Has anybody ever checked your thyroid? Maybe you have a thyroid deficiency and you're not necessarily, you're infertile because there's something else going on. Something basic thing that, can we figure out a way to do that before the patient has to wait 6 or 8 weeks just for a first appointment?
so then spend
The first 6 or 8 weeks because it's not the right time of the month, because I got the appointment when I could get the appointment, not when I was getting my period. So I can't have that scan now. I can't have that blood work drawn because it's not the right time. So I'm wasting time. I'm wasting money. I'm wasting the consultant's time because now I'm sitting here and I'm asking all of the questions, and now I can't do anything with this patient for probably at least another 2, maybe 4 months. And it's just not an efficient use of time.
This kind of then circles back to what we were talking about, and the almost like patient demographic. As an IVF clinic, historically, it was people coming in to create a family and to get pregnant. Now we're seeing an influx of people that are coming to freeze their sperm, freeze their eggs, maybe even freeze their embryo.
Freeze embryos, yeah.
And not necessarily get pregnant. Are there clinics that are only specialized in egg freezing or embryo making? Or is it like you go in and it's a one-stop shop for everything? Or like, how does that work? Because I can see an inefficiency, again, to your point of time for the doctor. Like, we're doing egg freezing when actually we're trying to get people pregnant, but we're doing egg freezing and that's taking up our appointment.
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. And it's someone that's coming in to freeze their eggs that doesn't necessarily present as infertile. So it's like, what is the right use of the resource? There's a massive discussion going on in the United States about what is the right way to allocate the time of the reproductive endocrinologist. In the United States, a physician will finish their 4 years of medical school. They will do 4 years of residency for obstetric and gynecology, and then they'll do a 3-year fellowship, subspecialty, reproductive endocrinology and infertility.
That's 11 years.
It's a lot of time. And there's not that many people every year that come out with that specific REI specialty. So, does a woman, young, healthy, 26 years old, need to see a subspecialty board-certified reproductive endocrinologist in order just to freeze her eggs? And that's really, I think, the crux of what we're trying to solve for. To your earlier point, are there places? Yeah, there are some places that more or less specialize in egg freezing. It's a different setup. Your overhead drop a lot. You don't have to evaluate a male partner. It takes a lot of that logistics and just throws it out the door. But if you're a clinic and you do sort of everything, then how do you allocate that time? Do you take your subspecialty board certified people and have them spend all their time with people just reading their eggs that, frankly, for the most part, are not coming back terribly often to come get them?
That's a really interesting one. So it was like having Stephen Hawking as your maths teacher for a primary school.
Exactly.
What?
Well, yeah, I know that's what you mean.
That's a
What is their resource? What is our most expensive resource? It's people. And the most expensive resource in a fertility clinic is the consultant. And what is the best use of that consultant's time? So back to efficiency and our cost of operation. Should that 11 years, should that subspecialty board certified, very highly specialized clinician be spending 2 hours every morning doing follicular ultrasounds on the ovary? Is that the best use of their medical history and journey? We have to think about that. What does it cost? What does the clinician make? And 10 hours a week is spent doing ultrasounds. Now, or do you hire someone that actually is certified and does ultrasounds all day, every day? Should that person be doing those morning ultrasounds? I'm not going to talk about from patient experience or not. We have to think about there's different ways to skin this cat, but the best use of their time is probably not spending 2 hours a day doing that, because it's really expensive time and resource. And I would argue almost a waste of that subspecialty, that education. Why is that person spending all of their time not medically treating or trying to get someone pregnant, but then just freezing their eggs? Should we do that? We can, and people do, but that's probably not the best allocation of resources.
So then this comes back to technology aspect, because I love the technology sort of thing, and I'm trying to see how that is incorporated. How is that?
Listen, there are artificial intelligence companies popping up all over the fertility space now. They're developing algorithms to help us choose better embryos, help us choose better sperm, help us choose better eggs. There are AI algorithms out there now telling you the best dose of medication to put the patient on, the best day to trigger that patient to get the eggs. And there are even a bunch of algorithms, which I think is really exciting, to basically do the ultrasound for you. A typical ultrasound for a woman undergoing fertility treatment, now we're hyperstimulating her ovaries. So now instead of one dominant follicle with one egg, maybe we're talking about 15, right? And so now the patient will come in, and there are other companies, by the way, that will send an ultrasound machine to your house, which could get super exciting. I'm advising one of these other companies, we can help about that later. But patient comes in, you get changed, you have to check in, maybe this, wait, they take this, maybe they draw your blood, you sit down, and they start doing an ultrasound, because now I have to not only count all the follicles, but I have to measure it. And we're standing there, drawing a line, it's typically like an X, you draw a line, okay, here's the length, here's the width, and okay, then we'll move on to the next one. And this takes time. There's now an AI algorithm that you could just scan like this, and it captures all of it, and it measures them all for you. And it takes like that. These are the kinds of things and technology and advancements that is going to really drive that throughput, that move the needle. Again, because if we think about humans being the highest cost, if that takes me 20 minutes to evaluate and measure 30 follicles, or it takes me 2 with this algorithm, how many more patients can I treat? How much time did I spend? What was my cost? What was my clinic cost for doing that sort of thing? So it's really interesting to weigh these. Nobody likes change, right? Our entire industry is just an exercise in change management. And we have this level of cognitive dissonance where we say, no, this is the right thing to do, but I'm going to do it this way anyway. So we always have that the onboarding and change stuff. But those are the things that are going to really make a difference.
Do you think that can be taken on board? Do you think, because to your point, there's always a resistance to change, right? That cognitive dissonance thing.
Yeah.
Do you see that people are taking these things and go, okay, we need to implement this?
Yeah, some people are actually. And you're going to see that. I would say we're in the early side of the adoption curve. We're hitting a nice rise in the adoption curve. At least for Department of Science, we're now with 3 live clinics in the UK here that have our technology. We've got a bunch of the market in the United States. We've just opened our second offsite storage facility because, again, if you think about all of the tissues coming in and all of them going right into storage, what are we going to do? Get another building just to keep stuff frozen? Why don't you implement some technology where you can identify it at the outset and then check it in and out of storage, check it in and out of the clinic, update that, send it all back to your electronic health record system so that no one has to enter data twice and the inventory is updated automatically. Thinking about how do you manage for scale? How do you figure out how to take care of the people that are coming in and then all the other people that you want to bring in the door? You need to figure out how to do some exercise in economy of scale.
As you can probably tell, I'm fascinated by all this Oncology because we could keep talking. I think we're going to have to get a bit of that. You are probably one of those disruptors that's going to make the biggest amount of change in this industry. And I'm so honored and privileged that you're my friend. And thank you so much for coming on to the podcast today. We will.
I'll be glad. Thank you for having me. And yeah, there's so much good that we can do. There's so much opportunity and it's really exciting. So thanks and love you too.